Welcome into another edition of the Throwing Chairs podcast. So much to discuss, and it is a great time to be an Indiana Hoosier at the perfect time in the season. Without further ado, I'm your host, Hayden Smith, joined alongside the Hoosier Network's finest Audrey Marr and Thomas Montalbano. Guys, it's been a great week for Indiana. Everything's really starting to look up. But before we get started, we're going to get this episode started of TCP like we do every episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. That's with our icebreaker of the day. Guys, I showed you all before this little compilation of our icebreakers throughout the season. We'll see that probably after this podcast in its entirety. But this one today, talk to Thomas about this and how I don't think we're going to be able to get this on the first try.
Apparently I will.
I don't know. I think so because of your current situation right now.
I'm so confused.
If you were a dog, what breed would you be? Audrey, I'll go straight to you because I know you have a dog of your own up here right now.
Well, my dog right now is a golden retriever. I don't know if I could describe myself as a golden retriever, though. I feel like a golden retriever honestly looks more like you, Hayden.
Whoa! Is it just because I've got the blonde hair?
I think so.
I feel profiled.
Can we talk about how Hayden has a list of dog breeds?
I'm trying to figure out what I would be.
Yeah, I don't have that list.
I'm
That
gonna be
would be very
honest.
helpful.
My gosh.
Some of these dog breeds on here I've never heard of. I've never heard of a chow
Can
chow.
I look at this, too?
I don't know what a chow chow is.
You know what? I think I'd have to go. I might just have to say golden retriever. I might also go no, but my personality isn't an Australian Shepherd. But I love Australian Shepherd. Mm-hmm. You know what? Just stick with the golden retriever because I have a golden retriever. Marley's the best. Shout out Marley. And I have Callie at home, another golden retriever. So.
Marley and me. All right.
No, not the same ending.
We don't want that ending. Thomas,
Nope.
let's move on to you.
I don't know. I'm gonna be honest with you guys.
It's difficult.
I've only ever heard of being described as a golden retriever.
Exactly.
I don't really know what the other descriptions of the dog breeds are.
I don't know what I would describe you as, Thomas.
Yeah, I went to golden retriever just because it's the easy answer and I know what that means, but I'm not too sure.
You could be. There's different colors of golden retrievers. With your hair,
yes.
You could be one of the darker golden retrievers.
I'll take a light retriever. A light brown
Be
retriever.
like a Labrador or something. I don't know. I don't know what I definitely do not have golden retriever energy. I'm definitely not, despite how I present myself on the podcast. That is not who I actually am. I don't really. This one was really tough, and again, I came up with this probably about 10 minutes ago, and I've just been staring at this list of dog breeds, and I'm just blown away on how many dog breeds there actually are. I have a Havanese back home. Her name's Willow. She's extremely old. I'm pretty sure she's 12 this year. She might be turning 13 here soon enough, as Audrey's computer just died on us just a couple minutes into the podcast. I don't know what I would describe myself as. Any viewers out there, if you want to take your shots at what you think each of us three are,
maybe
that'd be greatly
chihuahua
appreciated.
for you.
A chihuahua?
Totally kidding.
Hold on a
Totally
second.
kidding.
I just took offense to that.
Totally kidding.
That was
I'm
right
short.
hook to Hayden.
I know
Totally
I'm
kidding, guys.
short. I know I'm short, but that just hurt my feelings, man.
Bro, I'm under 6 foot myself. I'm just playing.
Oh gosh.
I've been dealt this card all my life, and I've just been waiting to get taller and get stronger, and that just hasn't happened. All right, well, we'll move on to this season of Indiana basketball. Guys, the Hoosiers are hot right now, winning their past 3 games. 2 of those being on the road. Indiana is up to 4 road wins on the season. The only other teams that have done that this season, Purdue and Illinois. So Indiana up there with pretty good competition. Let's take a look at that first game for Indiana, the comeback victory over the Maryland Terrapins at College Park. They won that game 83-78, the first time they've dropped 80 points against a Big Ten opponent all season long. Trailed by as much as 16 points at the under 18 mark of the second half, and they just absolutely dominated after that. Guys, I know we weren't on site for either of these past two games, but we all saw exactly the same thing. What did you all see in that victory in particular? Audrey, I'll start with you.
As Hayden said, forgive me, I will be rusty, probably because my computer just died. So, but anyway, I really think that this Maryland game really presented just how different halves have been played for Indiana. I mean, we saw it against Ohio State, saw it for Maryland. We even saw it last night against Minnesota. They really play differently in halves. Second halves in particular seem to be a lot better. I don't know what is being said in those locker rooms, but it has to be something in it, and it's working. So, yeah, that second half for Indiana was just amazing for them, honestly. Probably the best half they've played all season. And I think especially with Xavier Johnson's return, and we've been preaching that a lot, I mean, it's really, really showing, and they're really running almost a completely different offense. They've been saying they're running that fast-paced offense now, and their assists are way up right now, and just both Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway, once they're together on the court, they really do click, and it's a completely different offense, and it's working.
Yeah, to Audrey's point, the halves have been really a topic of conversation this entire season, but definitely as of late as well. That Maryland game, they entered halftime down 43-33. They were down 10. It wasn't a terrible half by any means, but Maryland definitely had control. And they just flipped the switch. We don't know what was said. I wish we had access, like I heard Galloway that one time for the Ohio State comeback. But yeah, Woodson said something. The players lit a spark underneath themselves. They came out firing in that second half. They ended up winning that game by 5, 83-78. Very high-scoring game. They have been fantastic knocking down threes, and not only just threes, free throws as well. Both of those have been a huge problem for them all season long, and they are really starting to click. That was definitely one of the main factors for how they were able to get the win, but also, like Audrey just said, Xavier Johnson is back, and I'm sure we'll get to him later on.
I mean, kind of just going off of Xavier Johnson coming back, it seems like really ever since he has come back, everything is clicking. Everything. I mean, free throws, three-pointers. I mean, they are a completely different team, and I think a lot of people are shocked to hear that. I mean, that is something that Mike Woodson was consistently saying day in and day out when asking what is causing these struggles this season. No one believed him, but you have to think this guy is the one that's watching these guys in practice every day. This guy is the one that's with his guys every single day of the season, essentially. So he knows what's going on behind the scenes, and even those assistant coaches were saying that Xavier Johnson was a big key to it, and it's showing that he is, even if his stats aren't necessarily showing like it did last night in Maryland. I mean, in Minnesota, it did in Maryland. I mean, he had 13 points with 6 assists. I mean, he's still providing that helping hand that Indiana needs, and with Trey Galloway as well really stepping up on that end, it's really proving to be a very much key to Indiana's success.
Yeah, Xavier Johnson he creates a whole new offense for Indiana, just again with how quick he is. Indiana's pace is so much different. I'll talk about that here soon enough. But again, his defense is obviously one of his best traits. But yeah, you look at that Maryland game, I mean, in the second half alone, Indiana shot north of 60% as a team, and everybody just looked so fluid out on the court. Everybody was just bouncing off of each other. The only guy that didn't play particularly well was Khalil Ware. He only had 9 points, but all 9 of those points came in the second half where Indiana was really starting to get on an incredible run.
15 rebounds, though.
Exactly. 15 rebounds was huge. The 6 turnovers is certainly alarming, because as a big man, you do not need to have that many turnovers. But as a team, Indiana played absolutely phenomenal against Maryland in that second half. Mackenzie Mbako just came into his own, had 24 points, 4 triples, and Indiana, like you said, Thomas, as a team from the line, shot spectacular, 14 of 17, and missed, so I think it was their last 3 of their last 4 free throws they missed. And I remember looking at the TV, and I was watching it with my dad, and I was like, man, they were right there to shoot 100% from the line. But yeah, I mean, you look at the game up and down. I agree with both of you guys. I think that was probably the best half of basketball we've seen Indiana play from both an offensive and defensive standpoint, because they really started to shut down guys like Julian Reese. Jameer Young just really did not have a great second half whatsoever. whatsoever because of the defense that they finally provided with Xavier Johnson on the court. We're going to now transition over to the game that happened last night, Wednesday night, at the time that we're recording this. Indiana traveled out to Minneapolis and Minnesota, not for the Big Ten tournament. It is going on currently for the women's side of things, but Indiana traveled to take on a Big Ten foe in the Minnesota Golden Gophers and got the job done again, 70-58 to increase their winning streak to 3 games. Guys, this one's obviously a little bit more fresh in our minds. Obviously, it wasn't an incredible start to the game by any means. Indiana got down a little bit there in the first half. Their turnovers certainly were a problem. But as a whole, 28 assists on 30 made baskets for the Hoosiers. That is an otherworldly stat that you do not normally see from a team night in and night out. That was just an absolute rarity, especially for an Indiana team that struggles turning the ball over, but they finally really just clicked on all cylinders in that game. What did you all see there?
Well, just watching the game last night, there was a point in the second half where I found myself almost like shocked that I'm watching the Indiana Hoosiers. I thought I was watching a different team. It seemed like every shot was going in. The ball didn't stop moving. And not only was every shot going in, they were taking open shots and drilling them. They were hitting them with confidence, shooting them with confidence. Watching from my home screen, I thought they were going in. I mean, it was a complete turnaround, and it's coming off of those other 2 fantastic games. And I think they're really just... They've been connecting, and now it's really all coming as one at the perfect time for them. They have one more regular season game before the Big Ten tournament, and their confidence looks like it's through the roof. No one is really playing or really dragging the team down by any means. Everyone is kind of stepping into their role. Khalil Ware is turning into what looks like a first-round NBA draft pick. Mackenzie Mbako is really stepping into his own, especially after... not the best start to the season. These last few weeks have been just remarkable. And then Trey Galloway, reading the floor and his assist numbers, I'm going to touch on in a little bit. But everybody has been phenomenal. Malik Renew has actually taken a little bit of a step back, I'll say. And that's not necessarily on him. Foul trouble has definitely hurt him, and that part's on him. But other than that, it's really just everybody else stepping up. And this team is looking phenomenal at the right time.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's almost just... I'll start off with this. I think your point on foul trouble is very important as well. I mean, it's something that Indiana has consistently had an issue with throughout the entire season.
And they're just dumb fouls.
They're dumb fouls, exactly. And we were all talking about our players to watch, and Hayden, you put Malik Renew, but the only thing was in parentheses with foul trouble. Exactly. You need to watch out for that. I did say Khalil Ware, just saying. Anyway. But really, it's a serious issue. I mean, their 2 highest scoring players in their previous matchup against Minnesota was Khalil Ware and Mackenzie Mbako, and they both led the team in fouls in those first, 2 minutes of the game, I think. So, I mean, just stuff like that, you really have to watch out for that, especially heading into the Big Ten tournament, because you cannot lose your big men at that point in the game. I mean, you're relying on them right now. And while you're getting more success with Xavier Johnson now back, and you're really are getting connected as one now, I mean, you have to watch out for that, because you're going to lose the people that are really running you down the stretch. So you have to watch out for that. Malik Renew especially has to watch out for that, because he gets himself into that foul trouble. But yeah, I mean, this team is definitely very, very connected right now. I don't know if I'd say it's a good time for them to be connected, but I don't know if it's necessarily the right time. I mean, you had a lot of other opportunities to really be connected and get those wins out of your back pocket, and now you're getting back-to-back sweeps, season sweeps over Minnesota and Maryland. I mean, you are heading into your final regular season game. The only chance you have of making the NCAA tournament is winning the Big Ten tournament, unless you really are winning these games by high margins. But yeah, these 2 last wins are huge, especially with them being on the road, but we're at the end of the regular season at this point, and you're looking at all of their other net rankings and just other factors like that, and you have to think, I mean, is this really it? I mean, do they have the chance of really still making the tournament, even with this success at this point?
Yeah, I do agree with you, Audrey. I think it very well could be too late for Indiana, but again, in my eyes, obviously the team isn't thinking about this, and Mike Woodson even said it after the game. I believe it was whenever he was talking to the Big Ten Network, that they are he didn't say it outright, but he did say that they're getting hot whenever they're trying to get back to the big dance. He didn't say that outright, but he did allude that obviously their main goal is still to get back into March Madness, which again, that's obviously going to be your goal. But from where this team was just a few weeks ago and how they haven't given up and they're continuing to play at an extremely high level, especially whenever it's coming to the Big Ten tournament, again, nothing is really too far to say that Indiana could still make a run in the Big Ten tournament, at least make it to a Saturday game and potentially maybe a Sunday game and say, okay, even if they lose this, is there still a conversation to be had that they're going to make the NCAA tournament?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have this conversation a lot more in detail here soon enough. I do want to end our conversation here with the Minnesota game. I want to talk about Trey Galloway. Yes, he had 5 turnovers, but the 11 assists, yet another game. I believe that's now his 3rd game this season, having 11 assists because he had the other one against Wisconsin, I want to say. I might be wrong there. It could have been the Maryland game.
11 against Minnesota, 12 against Wisconsin, and 12 against Northwestern. And
there you go.
It's
exactly.
3 on the season, but it's also 3 in the past 6 games.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And again, the only other people that have been able to do that, we said this last week, Isaiah Thomas. Again, Trey Galloway is just playing so much better, especially in a position that he's not used to playing. He's essentially become the main ball handler for Indiana. Yeah, you still have Gabe Cups, you still have Xavier Johnson, but they're not guys that are going to look to be that main playmaker for Indiana. That's exactly what Trey Galloway is starting to become, and he's excelling in that category. In the first career double-double for the senior guard, Trey Galloway, hats off to him. He played extremely well if you especially look away from those 5 turnovers he had.
But look at the
especially
5 steals.
The 5 steals too, exactly. So you make a great point. He made up for it on the defensive end.
Yep.
Obviously, you're going to look at the 5 turnovers and say, oh, wow, that's a lot. But you also got to look at
everything else.
Exactly. Well, and especially with how much he has the basketball, how much he controls the offense, he's going to have those turnovers. But some of them were certainly unforced turnovers. I think of the one where he just threw an overhead pass, probably thinking Xavier Johnson was going to go Michael Jordan Space Jam and just reach all the way up and grab that. That's a bad turnover, of course.
Did you see the meme?
Yeah, he quote tweeted it.
Was it Taj Gibson
no,
that
was
did that?
Jarrett. I thought it was Jarrett Jack. Do you remember Jarrett Jack?
I think it was Jarrett Jack.
Yeah, I know.
I knew it was a Knicks game.
Someone on the Knicks. I know that. Yeah, but Galloway.
Terrible pass.
Galloway thought that was hilarious. I thought it was hilarious. It's nice that they got the win and can laugh at that.
Exactly. And again, Indiana, like we've said, is just playing so phenomenal right now on this 3-game winning streak. Guys, want to break down this winning streak for Indiana. Again, wins against Wisconsin at home, Maryland on the road, and Minnesota on the road. What has Indiana really been doing differently in this 3-game winning streak ever since that 4-game losing streak? What's been different in order for Indiana to get this success?
Well, I'll say first and foremost, Xavier Johnson is back. That has to be the most important factor. Woodson would probably, I don't want to speak for Woodson, but I would imagine that would be one of Woodson's immediate answers as to what the biggest difference
That's exactly
has been.
what he said.
Yeah. Okay, then Woodson said it himself. X has been phenomenal. We knew he would be a big factor coming back, and there's certainly been others, some of those being knocking down the free throws, as we said, knocking down some three-pointers, moving the ball, better defense. I mean, really, so many facets of this team is just so much better. The bench production, I thought, has been better. Leal and Anthony Walker. I'm sure we'll touch on his injury in a few minutes. Such a very hard to see that.
It was great to see him at the end of the game, especially. You love that moment with him and Khalil Ware. That was awesome to see, especially with, again, they're sorry, I don't mean to cut you off again, 100%. Thomas. There's been the talk, and I have mentioned it before, but again, that's because I'm not in the practices. I don't know how this team is. That's really one of the first times I've ever seen this team really look like
Happy.
they're happy. But again, they haven't had a type of a win like that, so it's great to actually see that, Thomas.
Yeah, I'll just cut ahead to that. Khalil Ware knocks down his second three of the game. He was the player of the game, points to the bench. You see the smile immediately light up his entire face, but then they cut to the bench. Anthony Walker is back from injury, and his smile might have been bigger than Ware's. So that was just awesome to see for everybody. Put fans at ease as, we don't know what his health looks like, but it does look like he's all right and smiling back on the bench. So that was nice to see. But back to this 3-game win streak. Beyond everything I just said, Khalil Ware almost looked like has looked like he's unlocked another level. There's been a lot of NBA talk over the last couple weeks, and Ware has not officially said anything about what he wants to do, and
which he won't.
Exactly, and time will tell.
Yeah.
But he very well may declare for the draft, and if he does, he very well may be a first-round pick, and a lot of that could be credited to these past couple of weeks of play. Mackenzie Mbako has been phenomenal as well. He has scored in double figures in 13 of the past 15 games. 7 of those 15 have been 15 or more points. He has been a stud. He's been Indiana's best 3-point shooter, which they have desperately needed this entire season. Galloway is really filling in that leadership role. I mean, he has all season, I do have to say, but now with X back, it's almost like he's on another level, at least in the assist aspect. And then Xavier Johnson has not posted anything super phenomenal. He had 13 points, 5-7 shooting. That was a great game. But more than that, his tempo and what he provides, other than the statistics and the defensive presence and everything like that, there's a lot that's different with this team. And it's really encouraging to see.
Yeah, I think you covered pretty much everything. I think Khalil Ware, Mackenzie Mbako, Trey Galloway, they're all having a lot of success and a lot of growth at this point of the season. But I'm going to head back to your Xavier Johnson point. I really do think that Xavier Johnson just completely makes this team better. He makes them more connected. And another thing that Xavier Johnson even said, I think it was after Maryland, that he said that he adds the experience. And that's something, as a young team that Indiana is, clearly, that's something that Indiana needs. I mean, really, without that, they only had Trey Galloway, Anthony Walker, and Anthony Leal on the court. But now Xavier Johnson adds that as a sixth year. I think he, along with Trey Galloway, has stepped back into that leadership role, especially having him on the court and having him on the bench with a better mentality. And now that he's actually playing, not just sitting on the bench when he's still recovering from an injury, but to have someone like that to really just rely on when you need to really have that presence on the court. And now that gives the opportunity to have Trey Galloway to take a minute on the bench because he's playing games that's like 37 minutes. And then when Xavier Johnson was injured, there were games that he was playing all 40 minutes. So, to have that rotation now with Gabe Cup's development as well, to have that core rotation of Cups, Trey Galloway, and Xavier Johnson, I think that's something that has really moved this offense to be a lot more faster paced, which is something that they've been saying a lot as well. But yeah, I think just really Xavier that's all you can really accredit it to is Xavier Johnson, because I mean, he adds the experience, he adds the leadership, he adds just that offensive presence that Indiana was missing all season. And now they're really starting to prove themselves and show it.
Can I say one more stat real quick? I was crunching some numbers and I sent this in the chat and I put it in my article, but I'm going to say it on here too. In the first 23 games of this season, Trey Galloway recorded 89 assists, which is an average of 3.9 assists per game. And then over the last 7, and then this is where that Isaiah Thomas comparison came in from his last 7 games. He has recorded 54 assists over those 7, averaging 7.7 assists per game and raising his season average to 4.8. Yep. He has more than doubled his assists per game in these past 7 games, and it's really been huge to spread the ball. And we talked about his connection with Khalil Ware over the past probably 7 games. Well, really the whole season, but last 7 games especially. It's been phenomenal. It's been great for Ware and for Galloway and for the team overall.
Yeah, to add off of what both of y'all said with Xavier Johnson back with the team, of course, after injury, again, it like you both have said, it's allowed Indiana to play with a much faster pace because this is where that team really thrives. That's where they find a lot of their three-point shots. It's exactly what Stephen Bardo said on the Big Ten Network broadcast last night, that whenever Indiana gets out in transition, that's where they're going to get a lot of these three-point shots because they just don't have that kind of a Trace Jackson Davis, essentially, where he's down low and he gets double teamed or whatever, and there's an open guy out beyond the 3-point line. They don't have somebody that can find that open guy. So that's where they get a lot of their 3-point shots. That's where Mackenzie Mbako really thrives. And then Xavier Johnson, again, they get like a steal or a long rebound, and then they get an immediate outlet to a guy like Xavier Johnson, and they just book it right down the floor because he's fast. And if you get one of those big men down there like Khalil Ware or Malik Renew or even Mackenzie Mbako, you're either going to find somebody for an open 3-point try, or you're going to lob it up there and they're going to throw it down, and Indiana's going to get a lot of momentum out of that. Again, Khalil Ware, Mackenzie Mbako have played absolutely phenomenal here as of recent. Ware's just continued his dominance, had that 26-point, 11-rebound outburst against Minnesota last night. And then Mackenzie Mbako, over the past 6 games, has averaged 17 points a game on 43% shooting from 3. He's just really turned himself into an NBA-type prospect. Who knows what he'll actually do after this season? Will he stay another year? Will he enter the draft? Will he transfer? Who knows really what's going to happen? But all I'll say is that if he stays around the college landscape again, he could probably be one of the best wing shooters and wing players in the entire NCAA next season, without a doubt. We'll move on to Indiana's current situation in the Big Ten tournament standings, where they currently are. 8th place in the standings. If the season was to end today, they would be the 8th seed, which is right there at the top part of the bracket, with Purdue at number 1, who has locked themselves into that position. Illinois locked themselves into the 2nd place position. The only other position that's been locked in is Michigan in dead last. Indiana can move as high as the 5th seed and as low as the 11th seed with just a couple days remaining here in the regular season. Guys, there's just a lot of room for error here with Indiana. I'll throw out this stat that I have here in just a few minutes. I got this stat primarily from Mason Williams. Shout out to Mason. Really, guys, where Indiana stands out right now, what do you see from Indiana and how the Big Ten tournament could really play to their advantage?
Well, a couple weeks ago, I was definitely in the boat of they have to win it.
Is it a must win?
Yes.
Yeah, every
100%.
game was a must win.
I think this time I will speak for the majority of the Hoosier fandom. I think many people agreed with that. I mean, they were on the cusp of not making the NIT. And I'm not saying that that's all said and done with, but
they actually just got listed into the last 4 in for the NIT
wow.
tournament.
Consideration! Let's
There we
go! Now will Indiana accept that? Who knows?
that is massive. That's news to me. That's great for the team. At this moment in time, do they still need to win the entire thing for a chance to make the NCAA tournament? Me personally, I think they need to at least win, or at least make the final round. I think, in my opinion, that
to
also
at least be considered.
Yes, and that also includes a win against Michigan State. I think, and it's nice that Indiana as a team, they are not getting ahead of themselves like we are right now. They are taking it one
We
game
can.
at a time.
We're not playing on the floor. They should be glad I'm not.
As we should. But Galloway and Woodson, they've been asked this question a couple times for the last 2 games, and both of their responses have been like, I don't know, Michigan State is next. And that's where their mentality should be. And it's nice to hear that. And like you said earlier this episode, their overall message and their overall mentality is to make the NCAA tournament, of course, but one step at a time.
Yep.
And that's what we said. That's what we said months ago. I remember saying it months ago when they were really struggling, or maybe it was weeks ago. But just take it one game at a time. Don't look too far ahead into the future. And it's nice to know that they're not doing that. But for me, they need the Michigan State win, which I do think is very doable. Puts them that puts them in a 4-game win streak heading into the tournament. All the momentum in the world. Yeah. Basically fully healthy, and they can make some real noise in the Big Ten tournament. Now, finally, answer the question, is it win the whole thing or bust? Minimum for me, make the final round.
Yeah, I think a big part of it will be how they play against Michigan State, because Michigan State is a good team.
Yes.
They just beat Northwestern last night as well.
And barn burner right there.
Yeah, oh my
boy.
gosh.
That
I remember
was difficult to watch.
I remember looking at the score, and it was like 27-26 with like 10 minutes
Am I watching
left in the
a
second half.
JV
I was
game?
Like, oh
Yeah.
my goodness. But yeah, I mean, Michigan State, they're also on a roll right now, coming off of that win. So that'll be very interesting to see how they play there, and obviously if they win as well. I think a big thing to watch will be if they really do just carry their momentum into the tournament, because I mean, if they play the way they played in the second half in Minneapolis against Minnesota, and they carry that to Minneapolis next week, I mean, they could go far. In my opinion, I think they can go far, and I agree with you. I think to be considered, you have to make the final round. I think you really, honestly, at this point, if you can. It also does depend on the scoring margins. I think if they're like close games and they go down to the final minute, and then it also happens to be that for every game they're only playing well in the second half, I don't think you can really be considered. But if you play all 40 minutes like they've been consistently preaching all season, and not necessarily doing as of yet, I would say if there's one game that they did do it, it would be last night, because they did start off hot. They were up 10-0, I think, right? Yeah, they were up.
It was 10-0 or 10-2. It was incredible.
They were up for a while. So they started off hot, then they went down a little bit, and then the second half was a consistent 20-minute game that they were showing themselves. So yeah, to answer your question, we're both ending on the same way. But I do think to be considered, you have to really make the finals, win to make it, and just see how the scoring margins play out and how they play against Michigan State.
I think that Maryland game might have been the most complete game I've seen. At least one of them, 100% one of them, throughout the entire season, one of the most complete games we've seen from start to finish.
Maryland or Minnesota?
Minnesota, I thought.
Okay, sorry. You
said Maryland.
Oh,
No, you're good.
No,
I was like, the first half. But no, I completely agree with you. So out of 256 possible scenarios right now for the entirety of the Big Ten, here's where Indiana falls in their seeds from 5 to 11, a percentage out of those 256. The 5 seed against their top part, that's a 6% chance they make that. The 6 seed is 18%. The 7, 25%. The 8, 18%. The 9, 9%. 10, 18%, 11, 3%. I know that was a lot of numbers to just throw out there and vomit all over the screen at you all at. But here's what here's what that all means. There's a lot of room for error, and there's a lot of wiggle room there for Indiana, but they do control their own destiny on Sunday against Michigan State. You win that game, you're going to be up there at a 6, a 5, or a 7. That's really where you're going to kind of find yourself at, barring major upsets in the Big Ten on Sunday. I do want to dive into my best case scenario that I currently have right now. I've kind of gone megalomaniac right now in where I think Indiana can really fall. But here's their best case scenario. Stay with me.
We're ready.
Indiana gets the 6th seed in the Big Ten tournament, not the 5. The 5 is as high as they can go, but I think that's a worse position for Indiana, because if you're the 5, you're on the same side of the bracket as Purdue. And we all know how both of those games ended up. Indiana would probably rather have the 6th seed play the winner of Michigan and Maryland on that Wednesday game. Both teams that they've beat before. They beat Michigan once on the road and Maryland twice. They would be the 6th seed. This isn't as good for us. They would play at 9 o'clock, which is not fun, but I'd much rather play at 9 o'clock than play at 1:30. And Indiana would play the winner of Michigan and Maryland. If they were able to win that game, they played Northwestern, a team they played very close here in Bloomington. If they're able to win that game, they move on to the semifinals to play either Illinois, Iowa, or Minnesota. And of course, if they win that, who knows who they could play in the championship game. There's a lot there that could happen, but Indiana has a pretty good scenario right there that I think could really play to their advantage. To answer my original question, I think to at least be considered, you could probably at least get to the semifinal round to be considered. Will you make it? I don't think so. I still think there's probably work to be done. If you make it to the championship game on Sunday, I think anything's up for grabs because, again, if they make it all that way, again, the reason we're bringing all this up for you viewers at home is because we won't have another podcast before the Big Ten tournament, so that's why we want to dive into this as much as we can. If they make it all the way to the championship game, who knows what could happen because it's March. Anything can happen. Indiana can pull off major upsets. Purdue couldn't even make it to the championship game. They could get knocked off by a Nebraska that has already upset them earlier this season. Who really knows what could happen? Guys,
Or in Ohio State with a new interim head coach, and they're doing well.
Exactly. Ohio State would, in this scenario, would be up there with them. Again, there's a lot that can happen between now and Sunday night when everything's all said and done. Obviously, we'll have a much clearer picture by the time that game tips off against Indiana and Michigan State, because I think that game is that might be the first game that happens in that slate of games on March 10th. So, again, it's a very similar situation that what happened last year with Indiana potentially getting the double bye. At this point, I don't know. I can't speak for you guys, but I'm just hoping Indiana doesn't play a Wednesday game so we can have at least one day of just relaxation in Minneapolis because there's so much to do there. But yeah, there's a lot that could happen. That's all I'm going to say. I'll stop talking and we'll move on to our final segment, talking about this regular season finale, as long as you all don't have anything else to say about the Big Ten tournament.
No, I mean, I think kind of looking at that bracket that you were showing, Hayden, I really do think that probably is the best case scenario because that had teams such as like teams that can you pull that back up again? They had teams like sorry. I mean, that has teams like Minnesota, who you've beaten, Northwestern, like you said, very close game, Illinois, very close game on the road as well, Michigan and Maryland, you've beaten them as well. That scenario overall, that would be very good for Indiana.
Now, one of the biggest caveats with this scenario is Michigan has to beat Nebraska.
Okay. Well, that's very...
Which, who knows? It's March. Who knows what could happen? I'm coughing
March,
a lot
everybody.
because I'm trying to be as sarcastic as possible. But yeah, who knows what could happen? Probably not going to happen, but we'll see.
I think any scenario where you're not on the same
side as
Purdue,
is the best case
I think that's the best case scenario.
No question. Yeah. So a lot to really look at between now and Sunday afternoon in the game against Michigan State. It will be senior day here in Bloomington. Some of the seniors we will be looking at: Xavier Johnson is a senior this season. Anthony Walker, it'll be his last year. Those are the two that we know.
The last two seasons too.
Exactly. Those are the two we know for certain.
Yeah.
It's their last year. They cannot come back for another season. Now, Trey Galloway is a senior. Anthony Leal is a senior. Will they participate in senior day? We do not know that just yet. They haven't officially announced that. So we'll have to see if they participate or not. If they don't participate, of course, means they'll be coming back for another season. Trey Galloway still has his COVID year to use, and so does Anthony Leal as well.
I don't know.
We'll keep an eye on that.
I don't know if this is a stupid question, but so if they do participate, then there's no chance that they return.
No, they can return.
Yeah, because Paige Beckers of UConn, she's a senior this year in the women's basketball side of things. She had her senior day a couple weeks ago, and she participated. But during her participation, she announced that she was going to be coming back for another season. So again, it's not set in stone that it would be their last season, but it definitely alludes that, okay, either they're going to announce something or is their last season. The only ones that we know for sure is Xavier Johnson and Anthony Walker.
So why, I guess I'm asking, like, why wouldn't they participate in the senior activities?
It really just depends on if they really just want to get it, because some players just want to save it for the actual final season.
That makes sense.
I can't really speak on it because obviously I'm not a college athlete.
Let's do Booster Network Senior Day.
Don't. I'll start crying if that happens. We can't do that. I'll start crying in front of 17,000 people if we got that many people that are interested in the Hoosier Network. But yeah, we'll talk about the game in general. Again, Indiana and Michigan State, they're both teams that are fighting for good positioning and good seeding in the Big Ten tournament. Michigan State is at 7th, Indiana at 8th. Indiana is 9-10 right now in Big Ten play. Michigan State 10-9. So it ultimately means if Indiana is able to get a victory over Michigan State on Sunday, they would hold a tiebreaker over them in the Big Ten tournament. Guys, it's the first meeting of the season between these two teams. Really, what are you all expecting from this game on Sunday?
I'm overall expecting this to be a very hard-fought game.
Yes.
These are both Michigan State is a very, very good team. And as it's known, March, I was going to say Marchizzo.
It is Marchizzo.
It is Marchizzo, technically. So, Tom Izzo is known for being one of the best coaches in college basketball in March. So, this will be very interesting to see kind of, especially how senior night plays out and how those seniors also do perform as well, because especially Xavier Johnson, that's his first time really stepping into Assembly Hall and playing on the court of Assembly Hall. So yeah, I think overall this will just be very interesting for both teams to see where they can land in the tournament, because Michigan State's kind of in that same position as well, where they're not sure where they're going to end up just yet. So yeah, just seeing how they both handle that pressure, I think will be very, very important, and it will be crucial, and you'll be able to see kind of how they handle that pressure, because that's the pressure that you'll be faced with in the Big Ten tournament as well. So I think this is a matchup that, while they scheduled it for the last game of the season, I don't think anyone was expecting it to be as good of a matchup as it probably will be, and how important of one it will be as well.
Yeah, that's a really interesting last point. I like that point a lot, and I couldn't agree with you more. It's going to be a hard-fought, emotional battle on both sides for many reasons. I don't know what Michigan State has been through this season. I'm sure they've had their ups and downs, but the Hoosiers certainly have. Indiana is finding the momentum at the right time. You guys are certainly right. Maybe it's not perfect. A couple weeks ago it would have definitely been perfect, but they're finding it nonetheless to close out their regular season. They have a chance to finish on a 4-game win streak heading into the Big Ten tournament. They are back at home. It's senior night. This is destined to be an emotional game. On the other hand, Michigan State is coming to Assembly Hall, an environment that they know is going to be incredible. I'm sure they are planning for that accordingly. They're coming off a nice win against Northwestern. Not a perfect win or a pretty win by any means, but a win is a win. But I also want to say, you put that game behind them. The 3 games before that, they're on a 3-game losing streak. So they've lost
2 at home.
2 at home. They've lost 3 out of their past 4. 2 of those are at home. That's against Ohio State and Iowa. The one away was against Purdue.
Which was a 6-point game
right,
as well.
Yeah, they actually played pretty well. So, you can expect a close, hard-fought battle. Who will come out victorious, time will tell. Both teams certainly have the keys they need to succeed. But it's going to be one that goes down to the wire. It should be fun no matter what, especially with the Senior Day celebrations. But this Michigan State team should not be underestimated despite their record. And time will tell. Sunday should be a very fun, emotional game overall for everybody.
I've said this all season long. Michigan State is essentially a Gucci style of Indiana. They're just a better Indiana because they play remarkably similar to the Hoosiers. They don't take a lot of threes. They make them at a decently high percentage at 36%. I mean, that's certainly better than Indiana. They're a very good defensive team, one of the top 15 in the nation in adjusted defensive efficiency at 96. Their defense has really been something that's carried them all season long. But again, they don't take a lot of threes, but whenever they do, they make them. As opposed to Indiana, this team started off preseason number 4 and have just completely fallen out of the top 25. They're barely receiving votes right now. Just didn't get the season started on a good note whatsoever. Lost that first game of the year at the Breslin Center to James Madison. Now again, JMU has had a really good season this year. I believe they're actually playing. Yeah, they hold the nation's second longest active win streak at 10 straight games in the Sun Belt Conference. They're currently playing in their conference tournament here coming up. But yeah, they haven't had a perfect season, no question. They've had their struggles just like Indiana has. So I definitely think that this is going to be a close game. And if you want to be able to win this game, if you're Indiana, you got to slow down that man, Tyson Walker. This is an all-American type guard. He's been absolutely phenomenal this season. You're either going to put a guy like Trey Galloway on him or Xavier Johnson, whatever. I can only imagine he's going to continue to come off the bench because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. X has thrived off the bench here as of recent, so continue having him come off the bench and have Trey Galloway start off with him and then get Xavier Johnson on him for the rest of the game. But also Indiana's just going to have to knock down some of their shots like they have been here as of recent. So before we end things out, we're going to start with the first of our final two segments, our player or players to watch. Thomas, I'll go on ahead and start off with you. Who do you got for me?
Well, before we even came here, I knew I was going to go with Xavier Johnson, and I will. But before I do get into that, I wanted to ask you guys, so you think they're going to go with their same five-man unit
why
that's
not?
been working?
Yeah, it's been working, but here's another thing. Sure, Xavier Johnson's not starting the game, but he is playing starter minutes. He played 23 minutes, I believe, against Minnesota, and then in the game against Maryland, didn't start, played 32 minutes, and Gabe Cupps only played 8. So obviously, I think he's, as of where he is right now, I think he just needs to be on the bench, kind of get a feel for how the game's going, and then he gets into the game and he does what is needed from him. Gabe Cupps has started off these past couple games on a pretty high note. He did really well against Maryland to start off the game, got yanked for essentially the rest of the game. I say let it ride because, again, they're on this winning streak with X on the bench. I don't think there's any reason for him to start at this point. Keep it rolling.
I think keep the way. I mean, that's something that Mike Woodson loves to do is really be consistent in his ways. So I think if it's working and the 3-game losing streak, I think they stick with the starting lineup.
I agree with everything you guys just said, but to answer your guys' question of why not, the sole reason I even bring it up is just because of senior night, and this is X's.
That is true.
I
agree with you there. Yeah. I do agree with you there.
So that's I might be betting on that, like, to be honest, because I agree with every other word you guys said.
Probably
don't why fix what ain't broke. No. That's the only reason why.
No, I completely agree with you there because it is senior night, so odds are he probably will start. That's really what the tradition has been as of recent, that the seniors will start.
And then that could bring, like, Leal into question, or you don't think that...
I don't know. Because here's another thing why I don't think that would happen. If this was Michigan that they were playing, no question, they'd probably start Leal and X. But considering this game means so much, that's where I'm like, okay, Woodson isn't stupid, obviously. He's a good coach. He probably will stay with what has worked, but since it's senior night, I mean, who knows? You can keep going with your player to watch, though.
All right, so player to watch, I'm going to go with Xavier Johnson, thinking he may get the start, but even if he doesn't, I'm still going to go with Xavier Johnson. All three of us, Woodson, a lot of the fan base, we've all credited him with maybe the main factor as to why they've flipped the switch on this season and have been producing wins and phenomenal basketball play. You could point fingers at other people and other plays and whatever, but I'm certainly looking at Xavier Johnson. And I'm also looking for that kind of statement back performance. He's had some good games, but I'm looking for like a player of the game. We've called him the player of the game a couple times. I'm calling the player to watch right now. But rarely has he really been the standout player. And that's for a couple reasons. Khalil Ware, Mbako, Renew, all these guys all season long have really been having phenomenal performances. But Galloway has earned player of the game a couple times, and Xavier Johnson time is definitely due. I think he's knocking on the door of a performance like that, and I think it could definitely come against Michigan State. I think if he does get the start, that's a little more of a momentum boost for him, too. I'm looking at X, especially on senior night.
Yeah, I think Xavier Johnson is a good answer, and I think I might go with him as well. You know, I might go with 2 today.
It'd only be right.
Yeah, it would.
I'm going to go with Xavier Johnson for 1 because I think obviously with him this is his last game in Assembly Hall. This is really his last game that he can, again, prove himself despite tournament play as well. But yeah, Xavier Johnson, I think he does show up. I think he feels it in his bones. I mean, I think this is really the last chance that he can prove himself not only to NBA recruiters possibly, but also Hoosier fans. I mean, Hoosier fans have ripped this guy apart.
Yes.
They really have. And I mean, he has laid his heart on the line. He has really had so many injuries that would make people look in the mirror and probably quit. So he's come back every single day, every single season. This is his 3rd season with IU, and despite 2 injuries this season and being out for the entirety of the season last season, he's still coming in and giving it his all on the court. So I think this game on Sunday will prove that and show that his dedication as well, and he'll prove that to Hoosier fans who have been hard on him. Second player to watch, I'm going to go with Mackenzie Mbako. He's really been on a hot streak, obviously, and I think he's going to continue to show it. I think his growth is just skyrocketed, and he's really, really contributing to this fast-paced offense that is now Indiana basketball.
Audrey, ride the hot hand more.
All right.
Just teasing.
All right.
I definitely heard that last night.
Inside joke. Well, it looks like we're going to go 3 for 3 here because I'm also going to pick Xavier Johnson because it is senior night, because it's his final time playing in Assembly Hall. I agree with both of the points that you all just brought up, so I won't really add much more. Again, it's his last hurrah. He's going to go out with a bang. There's no question whether that is good or bad. He might try and make some of those behind-the-back passes that we saw against Minnesota. Hopefully not, but I think he's going to play a very integral part in Indiana trying to get this victory over Michigan State. And in light of that, we're going to give our predictions. I really hope we don't do what we did last time and pick
He's
the same.
already moving his computer
So
away
I'm just going to
from
move
me.
it ever so slightly. Thomas, you have been our pessimist, taking over the mantle of myself. Will you continue? Let's hear your score prediction.
It's funny you bring that up, because just thinking about it now, it's like I almost want to continue that for the benefit of Hoosier Nation.
Hey, throw out whatever you think.
But I've also been a pessimist because it's been my real thoughts. And I truly think Indiana will continue the hot streak, and I don't want to jinx it, but I'm going to continue going my true thoughts. I'm going to have Indiana in a tight victory. They're going to get it done. I'm going to go... I got them finishing the season with a bang, so I'm going to give them as many as 83.
Okay.
And I'll give Michigan State 79.
Okay.
Cool.
Audrey.
I am going to go on the other end. I think, especially watching how Michigan State played last night, it was very much a low-scoring game because, I mean, it was a highly defensive presence of a game as well. And that was the same thing for Indiana as well, and that's what worked for them last night. So I think that Indiana will really be more successful on the defensive end in this game, and I think it will be more of a defensive game. So I'm going to go Indiana 67-63.
Okay. For a second, I was like, oh my, did we just pick the same score? No.
Okay.
Not even close. Not even close. That made me think there for a second. But I'm also going to go with Indiana here. We're going to sweep the table here with Indiana. I'm going to have them winning this game 76-73. I think it's going to be very, very, very close. I think it's going to be the classic Indiana. It's either Indiana's going to start off super, super hot, build a big O lead in the first half, and then start losing it there in the second half, but end on a decently strong note and come away with a huge victory at home. or they're going to start off really, really rough and going to put themselves in a big hole and then fight back in the second half, kind of like what they did in the Wisconsin game, and still come away with a really, really big win. Thomas, I got one more thing.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's funny. I think this is like the most lopsided scores we've had. I could be wrong, but it's almost like I'm here, Hayden's like proportionally right here, and then Audrey's proportionally right there.
We're all just
We all have the same
right
scoring
there.
margin, too. We all go by 4.
Yeah, I'm almost hoping that Hayden is right, so that, because if you're right, I look horrible. If I'm right, you look way off. So I don't know. Hopefully, to be honest, India just gets it done, however they do it. And
I
we'll see what
definitely
happens.
need to look back in the recent podcasts and see who's winning the
Yeah, we
winning
haven't
the
actually kept
predictions.
track of that.
I think it's me.
All right.
okay.
Bro, I mean, an exact score is like 100 bonus points, but whatever.
Okay, all right.
Doesn't count. Okay, well, guys, this is potentially the last podcast we're going to do, at least in the regular season.
Okay, yeah.
Here. Obviously, we will do one more final time whenever the season is all
I was
said
going
and
to
done.
say, I definitely didn't
Whether-
prepare for this to be the
Wait,
last.
this is the last?
No, not quite yet, because obviously we won't have another one for the Big Ten tournament. But after the tournament, either Indiana's season will be over, or Indiana will potentially be dancing, and we'll have a good old dance party here for TCP. But that is going to do it for this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Be sure to follow the Hoosier Network on all of our social media platforms to stay up to date on Indiana basketball. Until next time, alongside Audrey Marr and Thomas Montalbano, I'm Hayden Smith, hanging up the phone on this episode of the Throwing Chairs podcast. Have a great day, Hoosier fans.